Hello, I'm Mike Watts, publisher of RiversandFeathers.com, a website devoted to short stories on just about anything fly fishing. Welcome to our Rivers and Feathers instructional fly tying videos. Along with Alex Hawley, a former student and teaching assistant in fly fishing and fly tying, and an excellent fly tyer, we'll be leading you on the different patterns and recipes as we go along our journey, and use these patterns to help you catch more fish. Alex will also talk about some of the techniques on how to fish the flies and where to fish them as he explains the recipes. Welcome to Rivers and Feathers.
Today we're going to be tying the CK Nymph. This is an Appalachian staple here on the eastern United States. It's a simple pattern with wood duck as the tail, grizzly hackle as a counter wrap on the body, as well as a dubbing to represent the underbody. To begin this fly, I'm using a size 10 hook that is 3x long. As you can see, I'm not tying this fly with a bead. However, it can be fished with and without a bead, both of which very effective depending on your water depth and if you are wanting to swing flies or let them naturally drift. To begin, I'm wrapping my 8/0 thread on the shank of my hook, making sure I have 4 to 5 good wraps that are nice and tight before I cut my excess. I then take my thread and begin making my way towards the back of the hook where I'll tie my tail. I like to leave my thread right before the bend of the hook begins. I'll then grab my wood duck fibers, making sure there's no fluff on them to make my life a lot easier. I grab a nice pinch, making sure that they're all nice and even. And you can peel them from the stem. Grabbing them with one hand, measure the length of the hook and make one loose wrap over the wood duck fibers to create a nice tail. I then follow it with one more snug wrap before taking my thread and wrapping it up the body of the fly. By wrapping over these wood duck fibers, it allows me to save thread and create a more uniform body. Once I feel like it's at a good position, I'll then take my excess and trim it. And begin taking my thread and wrapping it back towards the back of the hook. I'll then take my grizzly hackle and find a nice piece of it and pull it out. As you can see, the grizzly hackle starts very wide at the base and goes to very small. And since we are tying this in at the back, you want to have a nice uniform body. So what I like to do is tie my tip in first. That way when I'm wrapping, it goes from small to big, just how a fly would in the water. So I'll make one loose wrap and one tight wrap over the hackle, and then continue my wraps forward. Making sure that I'm creating myself a nice uniform fly body. I then leave my thread at the back of the hook where I begin to tie my dubbing noodle. You can also take this time to trim up any errant fibers that you might have along your fly. I then like to use, for my black CK Nymphs, Hairline's Senior Laser Dub, and this dubbing is actually very unique, such that it contains black, purple, and gray fibers within it that adds a nice flash while keeping it natural as well. This gets the fish's attention without spooking them, which makes it dangerous to fish. I then begin making a small dubbing noodle at the base and wrapping it tightly against my thread, adjusting it accordingly to make sure I have a nice uniform whip. As you can see, I'm starting out with just a small dubbing noodle, and I will add more as I move up the hook shank. I begin taking this dubbing noodle and wrapping it up the hook shank, slowly building a taper to the body until I run out of dubbing and just need some more. I'll then meet where I left off and continue wrapping this up the shank of the hook. Make sure to leave yourself enough room to tie off with, especially whenever you begin to wrap this grizzly hackle towards the eye. I then like to counter wrap my grizzly hackle in the opposite direction that I wrap my dubbing. As you can see, I'm making open spiraled wraps, just slowly building that body up. As you can see with that hackle as well, I'm going from a smaller size to a larger size, which adds to that bugginess to get that fish's attraction. Once I meet my thread at the eye of the hook, I then take it, wrap it around my hackle, and make one tight loop in front of it and 1 to 2 tight loops behind it before I trim the excess. And since I'm not using a bead, I then like to build myself a nice head right at the eye of the fly. And then I will secure my wraps with 4 to 5 whip finishes right there at the head. Now, lastly, this fly, we'll be trimming the hackle fibers that we have tied on. By doing so, I try and make sure that I start small, making sure that my scissors are horizontal with the fibers, and I'll slowly start making my way around it using my Regal vise and its rotary function to slowly just trim these fibers as much as I can, about 1/4 of an inch away from the body of the fly. which makes it a really leggy pattern. And as you can see, has a nice uniform shape, which is great for trout fishing. This fly has many variations, one of which being in a yellow pattern with a bead, in which I've caught many fish on. I find this pattern to be very attractive, as well as this black pattern, and that extra hint of that dubbing with the purple in it really makes it to pop in the water column. If you need it to get down a little deeper, use a bead. However, if you're fishing shallower water conditions, try it without it and see how many fish you can catch.
Thank you for tuning in to our Rivers and Feathers YouTube video on instructional fly tying. Also, be sure to tune in to the RiversandFeathers.com, where you'll find short stories on just about anything fly fishing. And we want to give a special thanks to Regal Bice. They have supported our efforts and our instructional videos, and we've enjoyed our revolution. And on that vise, you can tie anything from midges to monster flies. Remember, RiversandFeathers.com.